Hey Raghunath, tell everyone about our Patreon community.
Sure, Kaustubha. The Wisdom of the Sages Patreon community is an incredible online yoga resource. If you like the type of yoga wisdom and culture we share on the show, then our Patreon community is a great next step. This is a listener-supported podcast, and any level of sponsorship will unlock a wide range of live and archived classes, talks, and even workshops.
Raghunath teaches, I teach, and we have a host of other excellent teachers on topics ranging from yoga philosophy, asana classes, storytelling, Ayurveda, kirtan, cooking, meditation, and a lot more.
We even have an incredible online Bhakti 12-step recovery group.
So if you want to check it out, go to patreon.com/Wisdom of the Sages.
All right, let's get it on.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Live from Puerto Rico. This is Wisdom of the Sages, a daily yoga podcast with your host, Raghunath, and co-host, senior educator at the Bhakti Center in New York, Kaustubha Das. Welcome to the show and welcome to Makeover Monday. Thanks everybody for joining us. It's our daily study of the Srimad Bhagavatam. And we do this every day, 7 days a week, as much as possible. And we have a whole crew committed on Zoom that listen every day, as well as thousands of other people wherever you get your podcasts. In the background, you can hear crazy roosters screaming their heads off. Can you guys hear that? Or is it just...
Yeah, okay. A little bit.
It sort of sounds like roosters meets like people being tortured. It's like what the sounds of hell must be like.
That's country living, Raghu. That's what it's like. You know, you're a farm boy. You got birds like that on your property.
We don't have roosters,
do
though. They're too nasty. But they do that, but I just don't like roosters, so I don't keep them around. They got attitudes. They got attitudes, and they are always and they're mean. Birds can be nasty. They're a nasty group.
Well, humans are nasty to birds, so they're getting a little payback.
They're a little payback. You know what the problem is? We're just nasty. We're nasty, and then we have to train ourselves to unnasty ourselves. That's what I think has to happen. Yeah. Whatever we're born with, we're just a little nasty, a little off, a little broken, a little dented. And we have to notice, like, this is our material conditioning, our material training. It's not us. It's not us. We have to sort of undo ourselves. We have
undo the nastiness.
You got to undo the nasty. And sort of that's what the Srimad Bhagavatam, I feel, is. It's the undoing of the nasty. We come into this world with some type of karma, with some type of pre-programming. It's not a clean slate. We tend to think, like, well, I'm born, it's a clean slate. Look at that innocent little baby. We don't notice that this baby has been coming in from a previous life. It's not a clean slate.
And so full of karma seeds.
Tons of little karma seeds, that little baby. They'll manifest. Give it time. Wait till that baby hits puberty. But the idea is that whatever we got, whatever this karmic body we have we have a chance to transcend it. So this book, the study of the Srimad Bhagavatam, assists us to not go into the programming, but goes into the programmer. What do you think about that? Not the programming, right? We've been programmed for lifetimes of how to behave, how to think, how to react, to be at peace, to be in anxiety, to be depressed, to be addicted, to be happy, to be sad. It's been programmed into us by our behavior, by our choices, by the things and people we associate with, by our diets, etc. And so Bhagavatam helps us notice those things and helps us reprogram the program so we can get back to the original programmer, which is Sat Chit Ananda, filled with eternality, knowledge, and bliss. And this is actually the goal of yoga. That's why we call it a daily yoga podcast. We've been criticized by a lone critiquer. We're going to bring it right back there. There's a lone critiquer out there who's got issues with Wisdom of the Sages. And this person says, we should name his name, This person
I thought he
says,
was actually a nice guy. He seemed like he kind of liked the show, but he just had in my opinion, just a little misunderstanding of what we're all about.
well, he's like, they call it a daily yoga podcast, but it's not a daily yoga podcast. It's a soft sell of the Hare Krishna movement. Let me tell you something. Let me tell you something. What do you think we're talking about? We don't give a crap whether you join a different club, a cult, a organization. That's not going to help us. Joining some organizations is not going to help us on our spiritual trajectory. It could assist us or it could ruin you. It's really your choices of spirit over matter is going to really help us or not. And so we go wherever we find truth and we try to imbibe it. And me and Kaustubha just happened to be in the Hare Krishna movement. So we share, but it's not like the Hare Krishna movement owns those books. Those books are time.
Oh, the critiquer has somehow hacked him out. Raghu, come back.
And they're ancient cargo boat
There
and translate these books. So these books are, they're wisdom literature.
you go. Yeah.
So what was he saying?
I think
he was saying, oh.
it was just kind of a warning. Like he was saying, okay, it sounds like a nice show. It's fun. It gets into some interesting thoughts in it, but there's a warning. And it made it sound like we had there was some deviousness or some kind of deception.
Secret agendas. Secret
yes,
agendas.
Some kind of deception.
Yeah. What is yoga philosophy? What do you think I'm going to talk about? How to do up dog better? Right? Like, what is he expecting?
I don't even know if that was so much his issue. His issue may have been like maybe we're not upfront enough about like that we're coming from the. It seemed like he assumes our intention is to get people to join the Hare Krishna movement, and even what that means is kind of gray and unclear. What does it mean to like Mara? Have you joined the Hare Krishna movement? Well,
in their life, I don't see any great happiness in material pursuits. I'm sorry. And I feel like I've had a lot of great material things happen in my life. And I feel like it's really boils down to a now what, right?
Okay, where are you going?
You know where I'm going with this? I'm going with this. I'm in beautiful Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
And I tell you, I always tell this, Mara knows this deal. I always say, whenever I go on a vacation, after day 3, it's always like, now what? You know what I mean?
Well, it sounds like on day 1 you were there on this. You're becoming more evolved. Like on day 1, you're like, now what am I doing in Puerto Rico?
Well, it's our family. It's a family trip, and it's part of like the family program. Is you go on a family trip and you go on a family vacation, and it's our anniversary. 17 years.
Okay, congrats on that.
Thanks, but truthfully, it's sort of like, where is my joy? My joy is in my service. My joy is, Wisdom of the Sages is happening. Oh, great. I'm like right now I'm working on a book. Oh, I get to have some time working on my book. I like sunshine. Don't get me wrong, but it's sort of like.
But you don't like roosters, apparently.
I don't mind them. I was worrying more for you. I just think it's haunting.
I see.
The sound of listen, 1 rooster, 2 roosters I could get in upstate New York. That's sort of charming. We've got like 7,000 roosters here. It sounds like I'm on the gates of hell.
Okay.
Screaming for their lives.
Robert, why don't we move on to the substance of our show now? What do you think?
Okay, it's all substance. Yeah. It's just a different. It's a different part of the meal.
Okay, let's go to that main part of the meal.
Let's go to that tofu scramble.
Is that what it is? Okay. Why don't we initiate that by your chanting the secret mantras?
Here are some secreted mantras for you. Narayanam namaskritya naram chaiva narotamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayam vidirayet. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is a very means of conquest, one should offer respectful obeisances to the Supreme Lord Narayan, unto Narayan Rishi, the supremmost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and to Srila Vyasadeva, the author. Nasta prayeshva badreshu nityam bhagavat sevaya bhagavati utamashloke bhaktir bhavati naishtaki. By regular attendance in classes in the Bhagavatam and by rendering service to the pure devotee, all that is troublesome to the heart is completely vanquished, and loving service to the Transcendental Lord, who is praised with transcendental songs is established as an irrevocable fact.
Transcendentally.
Om Gyana, transcendentally. Om Gyana Tamurandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmritam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in darkness, but my teachers have come to me with the ointment of knowledge to smear them all over my darkened eyes. And I offer my obeisances to them. Thank you. Sometimes instead of saying that prayer, like when I'm doing puja, I'll look at the pictures of my gurus and say, thank you.
Oh.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm serious. That's what I'll just say. I'm going to say, I'm going to do this in English today. Thank you. I'm going to go out of the box today. Thank you. That's how it feels sometimes. I just do it.
All right.
Thank you. It's the same thing. It's a deep appreciation for what we got.
Okay, we're back with the Srimad Bhagavatam. We're in Canto 3, Chapter 5. We're still there with Maitreya and Uddhava. Or I'm sorry, in Vidura. Right? Vidura is questioning Maitreya. Maitreya is beginning to respond, right? You with me, Raghu?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm with you. I just walked through a spider web. Okay, so
Okay.
that's why I was doing the various mudras with my hands.
And, one of the things that Vidura asked Maitreya about is about creation. And we're going to hear quite a bit about creation moving forward. And I think in further shows we can talk about why that's important and so on. But why don't we just jump right in, because there's some really interesting stuff here. And you ready? Am I going to be doing the reading today because you don't have your computer?
You got to do all the reading because I only have my iPhone. I'm just going here with the roosters.
So I'm the play-by-play and you're the color commentary. You ready? You there? He just slipped away. He'll come back. So we're reading, this is, again, 3rd Canto, 5th chapter, text 25. And this is Maitreya speaking to Vidura about the process of creation. He says, the Lord is the seer, and the external energy, which is seen, works as both cause and effect in the cosmic manifestation. O greatly fortunate Vidura, this external energy is known as Maya or illusion, and through her agency only is the entire material manifestation made possible. Okay?
Gotcha.
You ready? So here the Lord is described as the seer. Let's see, Sanskrit, we've got the word, it says, some Drastu, the perfect seer. So Drastu, it's all related, of course, in the Yoga Sutras, the soul is called the Drista, right? The seer.
The Dristi.
Yeah, and Dristi is sight.
See, it is
right?
a daily yoga podcast. We say
There you go. We tied it right into the Yoga Sutras, and the Hare Krishnas don't even use that book. So my understanding is that when this term drista is used, the seer, Patanjali is using it to describe the Atma, the soul, us. He could have just as easily said, he could have mentioned any of the senses. He could have said the hearer, he could have said the smeller, right? But I guess right, that seeing is this kind of maybe the first fundamental kind of sense that when we talk about seeing. But it means that there's when we say there's a seer, it means that there's a conscious being, right? There's consciousness. The eyes don't see. The eyes are just a lens. But there's a conscious being that sees through the lens of the eyes, that experiences that experiences sight, right? That experiences colors and forms, etc., through the facility, the faculty of sight. And so that we could call that person the seer, but we could also call him the smeller or the hearer or the toucher or whatever. But it's just indicating that there's a conscious being behind it all. Okay, so
like I was saying in the beginning of the show, Prabhu,
what were you saying?
There is a program going on in the computer, and then there's a computer programmer.
The user. Oh, and there's the programmer and there's the user, right?
Yeah, and this is
here,
the user,
the
Satchidananda, the spirit soul,
that's
is the user of the computer, and then of course there's the program.
Right. So here it's saying that the Lord is the seer. Now this is, I find this fascinating. I find this very helpful. That just as wisdom means seeing the patterns, right? Seeing the similarities in the patterns, and seeing the micro and the macro. right? How things play out on one scale, they play out in a similar way in another scale. So here it's saying that the Lord is the seer, and it's describing that his external energy, his material energy, that he's seeing through. His consciousness, in a sense, is wired throughout the material energy. Just as within our own body, we are the seer, right? Within the Raghunath body, Raghunath, the Atma, underneath it all, is the seer, is the one that's seeing through that body. And it's Raghunath's Atma, his soul, which has spread consciousness throughout that entire body. So if you touch Raghunath's toe, Raghunath perceives it, right? And if you touch Raghunath, on his, the back of his neck, he's going to feel that too, because the consciousness stemming from that Atmos within the area of the heart, that consciousness is spread throughout the entire body.
It's all pervading.
Yeah. So you are the seer and feeler, et cetera, within that body. Here it's saying that Lord Vishnu is the seer within the external energy, within the material world, within the universe. His conscious, just as through our nervous system, our consciousness is wired throughout our body. So similarly, Vishnu's consciousness is wired throughout the entire universe. Okay? So it's saying here, the Lord is the seer, and the external energy, which is seen, works as both cause and effect of the cosmic manifestation. Do you know what that means, cause and effect?
Karma.
Well, there's karma, yeah, but here I think it's referring to like I looked this up, because there are these terms, the efficient cause and the material cause, and Prabhupada's going to speak about that in the commentary. So material cause, like Aristotle analyzed things like this, any kind of effect, any kind of change, it has 4 different kind of causes. And one is
I
called
like when you get all Greek. Aristotle said it like
yeah,
this.
Yeah, it's Aristotle. Come on, I know. So Aristotle, he said one cause is called the material cause, and the material cause. I'll read it for you. I actually looked this up and noted it down. Oh, not that's the wrong notes. Here we go. The material cause is. It's an aspect of the change or movement which is determined by the material that composes the moving or changing thing. So in other words, if let's say a table appears, how did this table get here? You're looking at a wooden table. What was its cause? How did it come here? Well, the material cause is wood, right? Without wood, there is no table. Okay? And then there's something called the efficient cause. And the efficient cause consists of what's apart from the table that caused it to take its shape, that stimulated the change. So in the case of a table, it would be the carpenter, right? An outside force stepped in and caused it to happen. So here it's saying that, and I'll read the purport. It's saying that Prabhupada writes, the material nature known as Maya is both the material and efficient cause of the cosmos. So Krishna's external energy is the substance of the material world, but also it stimulates that material world to move and take shape and form all the species, all the bodies, all the planets, all the stars and everything. He is the substance. His energy is the substance of the material world. And then what's going to become clear is that there's an external agent that steps in and stimulates the whole thing to start to move, to start to take form. Just like when you make a loaf of bread, you have all the ingredients, that are kneaded together into a dough. This one's for you, Mara. You ready?
It's the starter. The starter. Is that where we're going with this?
I was going to say that there's different ways you could look at it, but I would say that the material cause of the bread is the dough, and then the efficient cause is the heat, right? When you put it in the oven and you add the heat, then the whole thing there's a change that takes place, right? So in the material realm, you have the Krishna's external energy, non-conscious energy on its own, separate, temporary, constantly changing energy, different from his spiritual energy, but the material realm he's saying that, again, the material nature known as Maya is both the material and efficient causes of the cosmos. So it's the matter, it's the stuff, it's the dough. And then what's the heat that makes the universe start to take shape, makes the living entities get all their forms, makes it all come to life? That's the element of time. Right? Time is the heat. Time is the oven that makes it all start to move and all start to change and all of these things to take shape. So again, I'm going to read the verse again. He says, the Lord is the seer, and the external energy which is seen works as both cause and effect in the cosmic manifestation. O greatly fortunate Vidura, this external energy is known as Maya or illusion, and through her agency only is this entire material manifestation made possible. Okay, now here's the commentary. The material nature known as Maya is both a material and efficient cause of the cosmos. So there's the material cosmos, and it's Krishna's separated external energy that is the cosmos and that stimulates the cosmos to change and take shape. But then he says, but in the background is the Lord. But in the background, the Lord is the consciousness for all activities. He's the seer. He's the consciousness. His awareness is spread, is wired throughout the entire universe, right? As in the individual body, the consciousness is the source of all energies of the body. So the supreme consciousness of the Lord is the source of all energies in the material nature. This is confirmed in Bhagavad-gita. If you can get the verse, Raghu, I'm going to be like super impressed. Can you do it? Oh, he just froze as soon as I put through the
Convenient timing.
Yeah, very convenient. Oh, Raghu, I just put you on the hot seat and then you froze. Any idea what verse Prabhupada's about to quote?
Living entity in this material world is my eternal fragmental part.
Well, that's closely related, yeah, but it was a different one. It's 9:10. Do you know 9:10?
Give me the first word.
Mayad-yakshena.
Mayad-yakshena prakriti suyute sacharacharam.
Yeah.
Oh, it's Krishna as the actual. It's like Krishna's doing it. He's all pervading, just as the factory owner of Pepsi Cola. It's he's not necessarily he or she is not necessarily putting the bottle caps on the bottles, but it's by that person's energy that everything is happening.
You see what you just did, Raghu? That's exactly what I was talking about. Seeing the macro and the micro, right? You just went from macro to micro right there.
Right.
So yeah,
right.
here's the verse. It's
Right.
Mayad-yakshena prakriti suyate sacharacharam hetunanena kaunteya jagad vipara vartate.
It's a great verse, isn't it?
It's a great verse. I'll read I'll read this translate. Prabhupada translates it differently in this commentary than he does in the Gita. But he says, throughout all the energies of material nature, there is a hand of the Supreme Lord as the final superintendent. It's interesting that Prabhupada says hand, because literally what the word used here is eyes. Mayad-yakshena, aksha means my eyes.
Yeah, like his eyes.
Right.
Through his glance.
I see everything. I'm seeing everything. I'm conscious of again, drista, I'm the seer, right? Mayad-yakshena prakriti. My eyes are supervising all the prakriti, all the material energy. My consciousness is spread throughout all throughout it all. So he says, throughout all the energies of the material nature, there's the hand, or we could say the eyes of the Supreme Lord as the final superintendent, right? Superintendent. I mean, I'm overseeing it all. Due to this supreme cause only, the activities of material nature appear planned and systematic, and all things regularly evolve. And I love where you went with this. What was it? Coca-Cola thing or something?
Pepsi Cola. There's like one person who's like maybe founded the organization of Coca-Cola, and then from that person's intense desire and vision, I'm in Puerto Rico buying a cup of Pepsi Cola or Coca-Cola, a can of Coca-Cola, and it's not that he created the can or made the soda, but it's by that person's person's vision.
Yeah.
It's happening. It's by that person's vision, and a can. Here we go. So Krishna he's got different energy.
Raghunath, you gotta go. Raghunath, hear me out. Raghu, you're moving around and you're losing your signal. All right. He probably didn't hear that, but in any case, I'll continue. Raghunath, you got to go
The
back.
signal, I could stay put, and the signal's.
Any case, hopefully he'll
I'm
come
going back. I'm going back.
Yeah, go back. Thank you. There we go. So,
I'm going
I like what you did. You
Going
see,
back.
think of things like this. What is the Pepsi Cola factory, right? You have like probably a board, maybe even have like one guy on top. I don't know, you know, and then they have their board of directors, and then underneath the board of directors, there's like some kind of, you know, high level of management, and then that high level of management, like it will spread. It's like the awareness of the owner will spread through the board of directors, will spread through the higher levels of management, and then will spread through the lower levels of management to like, you know, like or let's look at it like government, right? Like say you have a president who's like you know, the federal government is responsible for the entire nation, and the president is like the top person. And then the awareness of that he's just one person. His awareness needs to spread. So he's going to spread it through, he's got a cabinet. And then for all the different states, there's governors. And then below the governors, you know, there's like mayors or whatever, you know. And then, you know, the mayor will have, you know, the borough presidents, like say in New York City. And then, you know, they're going to have like, you know, different councils for different, you know. But my point being is that the consciousness of the government spreads and spreads and spreads and spreads. There has to be awareness, right? Spread throughout the entire thing. And so what Vishnu is able to do is he's able to, you know, it's like Krishna is like, he's playing in the forest of Goloka Vrindavan in the spiritual realm. But through Vishnu, he's spreading consciousness from one level from the macro to the micro to the micro to the micro to the micro, you know, like to the smallest
to the
atom.
to
the mini micro.
Teensy weensy, to the teensy weensy.
Yeah.
And the itsy bitsy.
And then he's done a unique thing is he's also invested us with consciousness. So and that goes back to that other verse that you quoted, that the living entities are my eternal fragmental parts, right? That he's given individual consciousness to unlimited to living entities who become, in a sense, the Vishnus temporarily of a particular body, kind of, because their consciousness spreads throughout their body in a micro way. As he's doing it on the macro level, our consciousness is spread throughout our body on the micro level. And this is what consciousness is, you know. And what's being said here in this verse is that try to understand that this isn't all happening randomly. But just as in our body, our soul, us, our awareness is wired through the brain and through the nervous system, our awareness spreads throughout our entire body. In a similar way, the awareness of Vishnu spread throughout the entire universe, and therefore, and only because of that, do things appear to happen in a systematic way, right? Otherwise, when we see intricate pattern and intricate balance and design and so on, it means there's consciousness behind it. And Bhagavatam's pointing out that consciousness is the consciousness of Vishnu spread throughout the entire universe.
Could you say that we are like a Lord Vishnu to our body, and then there's billions of living entities, bacteria within our body, and then perhaps those living entities have like micro living entities inside them. Where does this Fibonacci spiral end?
It gets real tiny, you know.
It gets
maybe
real
with
micro.
with the Indragopa germ, maybe, I don't know. You know, that's you know, sometimes when the examples come from Lord Indra down to the Indragopa germ in the Brahma Samhita, it says that, right? But yeah, it goes down to a very tiny level. But
everybody know that little thing Kaustubha just said?
Indragopa?
There's actually an Indragopa. I think it's important to note. Have you ever heard of that, Mara? The Indragopa? They say that's like the tiniest living tiny bacteria in the universe.
Google Indragopa germ and Brahma Samhita. And
Indragopa germ.
Yeah.
It's Monday. She's moving a little slower today. She's got to get her cup of chai in her.
But, you know, this idea, you know, there's an article I thought we could read, Raghunath. I found it really interesting. I just pulled it up this morning. And it has to do...
Pulling up articles this morning?
I'm pulling up science articles, Raghu. We'll get into
science. Everybody else must have been studying the science this morning. Good for you. Good for you,
Okay.
Kaustubha.
You ready for some science? I'm going to blind you with science. You ready?
Good.
Did you get that Indragopa germ there?
I did. In the Brahma
I got
Samhita,
blinded with science. Okay. Go
it
ahead.
is said that beginning from the Indragopa germ up to the great Indra, king of heaven, all living beings are subjected to the law of karma and are bound to suffer and enjoy the fruitive results of their own work.
That's right. Okay.
Whoa. That's called radical responsibility. Can't
Okay.
blame anybody. From Indra to the Indragopa germ. I think that's a rough translation of germ. Means like something so microscopic.
Yeah.
They're all responsible for their activities. And they've all done something to get there. And it's temporary. It's going to change. Okay.
All right. Now let's get into a little science. Okay?
Yeah, it's 5 a.m. Let's study science journals.
Okay. It's not a too complicated one. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to understand it.
Okay.
But on this top, here again, Maitreya is telling Vidura, hey, there's a consciousness that's wired throughout the entire universe. Okay. Don't see the universe as just like some kind of random explosion. No. There's a consciousness. There's just like Coca-Cola bottles don't just appear on their own. There's an owner that spreads his consciousness through a board of directors, through higher level management, through lower levels of management, right down to the factory workers.
It appeared from an explosion.
Yeah, it's
Coke
only,
machine.
Yeah. Okay, so it's only through this very conscious, spreading of awareness being wired throughout that entire organization through its management structure. It's a network. If you drew on a chart the the management structure, basically you get something that looks like a nervous system, And in a similar way, there's a nervous system spread throughout our body, but there's always the seer, right? It's just like our nervous system. There's the soul behind the nervous system, and it's the soul is the source of the consciousness, which is spreading, right? And so this is this is really the most important fundamental question in science, and it's the question that Srila Prabhupada points to again and again and again and again in his books. Prabhupada used to say, you have these universities like, Harvard University and so on, MIT, but where is the university that's teaching the science of the soul, right? Like what is consciousness and where does it really come from? Now, as people struggle, as scientists struggle with this question, they're beginning to turn, and I believe it's also due to the influence of certain scientists within that realm that have been pushing this, including scientists kind of deputed by Srila Prabhupada, but, other scientists, as well. This is an article from a person named Stephen Taylor. He's a senior lecturer in psychology at Leeds Beckett University. And it was published and let me find out where I found this. It was published on a website called The Conversation. And the title of it is Spiritual Science, How a New Perspective on Consciousness Could Help Us Understand Ourselves. Okay. But this new perspective of consciousness is a very old perspective.
Right. It's always new. Science have just discovered what the Bhagavad Gita was mentioning for millennia.
Yeah. And so let's hear what he has to say. He says, scientists have long been trying to understand human consciousness, the subjective stuff of thoughts and sensations inside our minds. There used to be an assumption that consciousness is produced by our brains, and that in order to understand it, we just need to figure out how the brain works. Okay? That's, okay, it must be the brain. It's all a machine. There's no other element. It can all be explained materially. That was the assumption. He says, but this assumption raises questions. Apart from the fact that decades of research and theorizing have not shed any significant light on the issue, there are some strange mismatches between consciousness and brain activity. So, what he says there, apart from the fact that decades of research and theorizing have not shed any significant light on the issue. When I hear that, I think of that joke, that I think I've shared on the show before, but that when you come home in the evening and you see your neighbor out in the street and he's crawling around in the dark, or he's crawling around actually under the lamppost, and you walk over and you say, hey, what's the matter? You lost something? He says, yeah, I lost the keys to my house. He said, oh, you lost them here? He said, no, I lost them over there. Well, why are you looking here? Well, because there's more light over here, right? It's, that assumption,
Right.
that scientists have commonly used, that everything can be explained by material phenomenon. What if the truth lies outside that? You're never going to find it. So just because that's your realm, because that's as far as your lamppost shines, doesn't mean that the truth isn't beyond, that.
That's
Right?
good.
Yeah.
You always told that story. I never liked it, but I actually really like it today. That really
Okay,
makes
there you go. It clicked.
Sometimes it takes a while for those analogies to click in.
It clicked.
Yeah.
Okay. So now he says now this is what he says, this assumption raises questions. Okay, I've read that already. He says, for example, the neuroscientist Giulio Tononi has pointed out brain cells fire away as much in some states of unconsciousness, such as deep sleep, as they do in a wakeful state. So if the brain were the source of consciousness, well, here it's firing away in an unconscious state. So there seems to be a disconnect.
Right.
He says in some parts of the brain you can identify neurons associated with conscious experience, while other neurons don't seem to have any effect on it. So whole systems of neurons within the brain seem to have no relation to consciousness. And then he mentions a third thing here. He says there are also cases of very low-level brain activity, such as during some near-death experiences and comas, when the consciousness may not only continue, but even becomes more intense. So the conscious experience is becoming more intense, but the brain isn't hardly even functioning. So just looking at this scientifically, it appears to show a disconnect between the brain and consciousness. And then he goes on.
Interesting.
Interesting. Okay. He says if you held a human brain in your hand, you would find it to be a soggy clump of gray matter, a bit like putty. You ever hold a human brain in your hand, Raga?
Twice I did.
Okay, I know you're into skulls. He says, how is it possible that this gray, soggy stuff can give rise to the richness and depth of your conscious experience? This is known as the hard problem of consciousness. As a result, many eminent philosophers such as David Chalmers and Thomas Nagel, and scientists like Christoph Koch and Tononi have rejected the idea that consciousness is directly produced by brain processes. They have turned to the alternative view, and here it is, right? That it is actually a fundamental quality of the universe, right? You go to Bhagavad-gita, right where Krishna begins to speak, right? He's describing how the consciousness within the body of a child, within a youth, within an old person, it doesn't change. It's fundamental that you can't cut it with a knife. You can't burn it with fire. You can't wither it through the wind. It's a fundamental element, consciousness, right? It's not produced by a combination of material ingredients. It is something it's a fundamental substance. So he says, now this may sound far-fetched, but think about the other fundamentals in the universe we take for granted, such as gravity and mass. Consciousness would have the same status as those. Okay. Let's continue. He says, fundamental explanations. One of the reasons I'm in favor of this approach, that consciousness is this fundamental element, is that the idea of consciousness as a fundamental quality offers elegant solutions to many problems which are difficult to explain using the standard scientific model. And he lists 4 problems that he's going to discuss. Okay? One is the relationship between the brain and consciousness. One has to do with altruism. Why are we altruistic sometimes? Because science doesn't seem to explain that. Another one is called awakening experiences. And to me, this is the most interesting one of all. And the fourth one is the placebo effect. All right. So he says, first, it can explain the relationship between the brain and consciousness. The brain does not produce consciousness, but acts as a kind of receiver which picks up the fundamental consciousness that is all around us. It transmits it to our own being. Now, this is a very interesting thought, right? That your awareness isn't due to brain activity, but the brain is playing a part in how awareness connects with your body. You with me, Raga? No?
Yep.
Okay. He says, because the human
Can you
brain
hear me?
is... Yeah,
So-
sometimes you can. Sometimes you're a little frozen. Yeah. Looks beautiful there.
Sorry.
Okay, it says, because the human brain is so sophisticated and
It's
complex...
the sky. You got the same one.
Well, it's trees too, and the whole thing. Because the human brain is so sophisticated and complex, it is able to receive and transmit consciousness in a very intense and intricate way, so that we are probably more intensely and expansively conscious than most other animals. One of the arguments for assuming that the brain produces consciousness is that if the brain is damaged, consciousness is impaired or altered, right? So like if I get in a car accident and my head gets slammed hard and there's some injury to my brain, it affects my consciousness. So that would seem to indicate that the brain is producing consciousness. He says, however, this doesn't invalidate the idea that the brain may be a receiver and transmitter of consciousness. And now he gives a really nice analogy. He says, a radio doesn't produce the music that comes through it, but if it is damaged, its ability to transmit the music will be impaired. Right? So if I look at yeah, you like that? Maurice?
Yeah, that was a good one. I'm going to steal that.
Steal it. Right? If I'm looking at a radio and I say, well, look, obviously the radio, this complex electronic machine, is producing music. Well, it's actually not producing the music. It's just picking up a signal that already contains the music, and is then kind of in whatever its way transmitting that signal through a speaker, and then we hear the music. Now, if the radio is damaged, it doesn't mean the signal is damaged, and people may be picking up that signal on other non-damaged radios, right? So it wasn't the computer, or rather the radio was just playing like an intermediate role. It's part of a system, but it's not the source of music. Similarly, the brain picks up consciousness.
Seems like the yoga.
Yeah. Go ahead. The yoga.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt here, but I'm thinking like the whole yoga system, every like little detail about the yoga system, from the gross physical practice to the breathing practice to the meditation to the chanting, it's just sort of like refine that receiver. What do you think about that? You're saying how the receiver of the broken, we're saying if the radio, if there's a damaged radio, then it can't pick up the signal well.
Yeah. So
Did that analogy work?
I think it worked on a different level, but not on the level that we're talking about. Like in one sense, I think what you're talking about is like kind of hear the voice of God in ourselves or something like that. Is that what you're kind of saying? But what this is saying is just really fundamentally, like even
or God.
But even medically, like biologically, how is consciousness spread throughout the body? It's not that the brain produces that,
right?
But it just becomes the network through which consciousness spreads through the body. Now listen to this. I'm going to jump forward in this, and I'm going to go to where he talks about awakening experiences. He says, one of my main areas of interest as a psychologist is what I call awakening experiences, when human awareness intensifies and expands, and we experience a sense of oneness with other human beings, nature, and the world as a whole. Right. I see awakening experiences as encounters with fundamental consciousness, in which we sense its presence in everything around us, including our own selves. We experience a sense of oneness because oneness is the fundamental reality of things. And if you look at that, it's a perfect description of the type of awareness that's spoken about throughout the Bhagavad-gita, throughout the Srimad Bhagavatam. It's constantly mentioned. And this is why if we go back to today's verse, and I'll read it again, if I can find it. He says, the Lord is the seer, and the external energy, the universe, which is seen, works as both cause and effect in the cosmic manifestation. O greatly fortunate Vidura, this external energy is known as Maya illusion, and through her agency only is the entire material manifestation made possible. But the fact that the seer, right, that Lord Vishnu, his consciousness is spread throughout everything. It's everywhere. And then every other conscious being is connected to that network, right? And so, like, if you go, like, take a verse like Bhagavad-gita 4:35. Bhagavad-gita 4:34 is this really often quoted verse about, like, how one receives knowledge, right? Hit it, Raghu, 4:34.
Tadvidhi pranipratena pariprashnena sevaya upadekshanti te jnanam jnanitas tatvadarshinaha.
Just try to learn the truth by approaching a spiritual master. Inquire from them submissively and render service unto them. The self-realized souls can impart knowledge unto you because they have seen the truth. Okay, but what is that truth? What is it that you see? What is that you become aware of that you're not aware of now? And he says, next verse, 4:35, having obtained real knowledge from a self-realized soul, you will never fall in again into such illusion. For by this knowledge, what will you see? You will see that all living beings are but a part of the Supreme, or in other words, that they're a mind, right? That there is a fundamental oneness, that is all connected, and when people wake up to that and when they feel it, that's the beginning of, it's the beginning of, like, real wisdom, like Bhagavad-gita is going to say, when you see the oneness of, the Brahmin, the elephant, the dog, and the outcast, all different levels of people, all different levels of animals, you see that there's a oneness, that the consciousness, right, that's spread throughout the elephant is of the same nature as the consciousness that's spread throughout me, right, and ultimately the consciousness of God, right, that there's a oneness, that it's all this fundamental energy, the Atma, the consciousness, Purusha, spiritual energy, is spread throughout everything. And there's many, there's so many. Here's this from chapter 6 of the Gita. Let me read this. I have to find it. I'm sorry. I thought I had this laid out before, but from,
you got it in your head?
Okay, I got it. No. He says, the yogi whose mind is fixed on me verily attains the highest perfection of transcendental happiness. He is beyond the mode of passion. He realizes his qualitative identity with the Supreme. I'm of the same conscious energy, right? And thus he is freed from all reactions to past deeds. Now I've gone beyond the lower modes of nature. I become free of my past karma, because it's just like a prisoner that got let out of prison. I don't need any more reforming, right? And it goes on to say, thus the self-controlled yogi, constantly engaged in yoga practice, becomes free of all material contamination and achieves the highest stage of perfect happiness in transcendental loving service to the Lord. Now, how are they seeing the world in that state of consciousness? And this is the whole thing. You don't have to go to heaven. You don't have to go anywhere. Right in this world, you could be situated in this consciousness. He says, a true yogi observes me in all beings, and also sees every being in me. Indeed, the self-realized person sees me, the Supreme Lord, everywhere. So they can feel that network, just like, music comes through the radio and then it spreads out, just as the awareness, just like in a really good business. Well, I'll give you an example, a practical example, like a real example. Just like when you and I visit the Chowpatty Temple in Mumbai, right? And we arrive there, and somebody walks out and greets us, a representative of the temple, and they have this hospitality department, right? And they come and say, welcome, we're so glad to have you here. Let me help you. Let me help you with your bags. Let me help you. Are you hungry? Do you need something to eat? What would you like to do? Here's all that you need. When people, this is a very common experience, that people, when they go to the Chowpatty Temple, they feel the presence and the mood of Raghunath Swami spreading throughout the entire staff of that organization, right? So it's like you can feel him, through the network. And so when this verse in the Gita says, they see me a self-realized person sees me, the same Supreme Lord, everywhere. It means when I hear the rooster crowing in the morning and I watch the sun rising in the morning, right? Like all you're experiencing there in Puerto Rico now, right? I'm feeling that presence spread throughout this. Even though this is material energy, I'm feeling the presence of the designer through it at every moment, right?
Mm.
So he says, and then he says this famous verse, for one who sees me everywhere and sees everything in me, I am never lost, nor is he ever lost to me. Such
Great
a yogi,
verse.
great verse, right? Such a yogi who engages in the worshipful service of the supersoul, knowing that I and the supersoul are one, remains always in me in all circumstance. Right? He is a perfect yogi who, by comparison to his own self, sees the true equality of all beings in both their happiness and distress. So this, there's tons and tons and tons of examples of what in the Gita, in the Bhagavatam, and in other, Mahabharata and so on, that are descriptions of what this psychologist is calling the awakening experience, when human awareness intensifies and expands and we experience a sense of oneness with other human beings, nature, and the world as a whole, right? And in the Bhagavatam and the Bhagavad-gita are just kind of laying this out all along, that yes, understand, what's the first thing that Krishna explains to Arjuna is that consciousness is a fundamental ingredient. It's not something that's produced at any point, but it's what's the word? Irreducible, right?
Mm.
It can't be reduced. It can't be broken down into other ingredients. It's a foundational principle, right? And that means it's beyond the brain, because the brain is something that, is put together in one moment and then falls apart in another moment, right? It's here for some time and then it disappears. But consciousness, and that's Bhagavad Gita, what, 2:13, right? Or is it 2:12?
Yeah. Right out of the gates.
Yeah, right out of the gates. It's like, just watch how you go through many bodies even in one lifetime. You want to pull up 2:12? Dehino sminyata dehe, Mara? Dehino sminyata dehe kalmaram
As
yoganam
the
niratata.
embodied living entity passes in this life, from childhood to youth to old age, similarly, the soul enters a new body at the time of death. Those who are sober, or those who are wise, are not bewildered by such a change.
Yeah, they can understand, right? It's just like if the radio broke and I thought music was finished, I would be bewildered, right?
Right.
It's just that radio is broken, but the music is still going on. Someone else with another radio is picking it up, and that same signal will get picked up through a new radio. So similarly, the soul is eternal. That the seer, right? The Atma exists eternally, and so even though this body changes, and then you change from one body to the next, it goes on after death. And then that our awareness of that is the beginning of spiritual knowledge. And when you begin to see this oneness, right, that the awareness in me is of the same nature as the awareness in you, and that's of the same nature that's of awareness in the animal too, right? It's the same energy, right? And I see it, and it's actually the same energy that's within the earth and that's spread throughout the universe. Now you're actually beginning to see like a true yogi, and now you're actually beginning to see like a true wise person. And it's this consciousness, right? It's this consciousness, this awareness, that is really the answer to all our problems. And this is just what we need to get, right? If you want to
fix... This brings us to our wisdom nugget of the day, Kaustubha. Well, there is a man who is sleeping. And while he is sleeping, he sees a python coming right at him. And the python is ready to wrap around his leg, and it starts to wrap around his ankles. And he's in the grips of this python. He's feeling, in his sleep, he's feeling his heart racing, because this happens when you sleep. Your heart races. You can even sweat. You can even scream in your sleep. But not only that, a tiger comes, because sometimes animals fight over prey. All you have to, sometimes animals do fight over prey. Like an alligator will grab a deer, and all of a sudden a lion will grab a deer, and they're fighting over the deer. The poor deer is like, help. So now a tiger's pulling at your arm, a python's at your ankles, and you're like, what do I do? And there's a machete on the floor. What do you kill first? Do you kill the python? Do you kill the lion? And the answer is, you wake up from the dream. You don't kill one of the animals. You're in a dream. You shed light on the dream by waking up. So what are we doing in this state of dark illusion and terror and fear in the material world? We wake up from the dream of the material world. We shed light on life. We understand we're not dying, that this is not me. The body is not me. That's why these very simple foundational verses of the Bhagavad-gita, we're not a body, we're spirit. This is the big truth. This is to give person that takes away anxiety. At least it gives you some perspective of who you are, who your family is, what reality is, what your career is, what your home is. And you see it in perspective. And that's why the yogis always teach that the highest charity, the highest welfare work you can do for the world is give truth, is give knowledge.
Right.
Because it's actually the best thing you can. It's not to give a sword. It's not to give a sword to the guy sleeping. It's not to give the guy pepper spray for the tiger. That's not the highest welfare work. You got to give him truth. You're asleep, dude. Wake up. Just wake up.
Right. Right. You know, and that's why, and what I was, thank you for sharing that. And where I was going is like, we're living in a world that has a lot of serious problems, right? The problem of racism, the problem of misogyny, so much different. Wherever there's power, there's oppression. Wherever there's power, there's abuse. In so many different realms, and we can try to address each one individually, try to legislate each one individually, and it's a constant battle, and in the end, it never fully works. So,
well, the thing is, there's always going to be a rise and fall of issues in the world. There's going to be always people who are taking advantage and always people who are being taken advantage of. And sometimes it's going to be huge and sometimes it's going to be tiny. And then it's just going to go up and down like that. You can't escape it. Go on.
Well, so my point is this, is that we can keep treating the symptoms of the disease, right? Where racism is popping up over here, let's try to create and I'm not saying that we don't need to legislate it. Please understand. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is, even if we were able to really expertly legislate that, there's oppression is going to pop up in other forms, and
Sure.
So the real solution is actually to help people. It's knowledge. Ignorance is the cause of the problems, and knowledge is the solution. And the point is this: what this psychologist Stephen Taylor, I think was his name, what he's calling awakening experiences, where you see a oneness everywhere, you feel it profoundly. That's a spiritual experience, right? That's a recognition that you are the consciousness within you is the same consciousness within me, is the same consciousness within the animal, is the same consciousness within the plant and the earth and the sun and everything, and that is sacred. That energy is a sacred energy, and it all needs to be respected. And then I can see you, no matter what race, no matter what gender, no matter what species, I can see you as my equal, my friend, that we're all bound together. And that it's that consciousness, if we develop that consciousness, if we can raise awareness of that consciousness, then it's like they say, a rising tide lifts all the boats, right? Then with that consciousness, we can overcome all of these problems. And that's why, that's the focus, of going back to our critic, it's not like we're like a soft sell for the Hare Krishna movement, but the leader of the Hare Krishna movement understood this thing very profoundly, and he tried to
right.
He tried to present the ancient texts that were presenting this truth and draw big circles around them so that we could really get this point, and so really, he would say that. People would say, well, why have you come to the West? He would say, to create a group of first-class people. And what he meant by that was like wise people that could spread wisdom, that could share wisdom so that we could solve all our problems. And really, that's just what we're trying to do, is try to, be one little voice amplifying that message.
Yeah, save us from the greatest pain, giving truth. That was beautiful. Mr. DJ, you're the DJ today. You know that, right?
What? Mr. DJ is ready.
All right, DJ.
Go.
Thanks, everybody, for joining us. Srimad Bhagavatam. We do it every day. We got to think of a great subtitle. Srimad Bhagavatam. Wisdom of the Sages.
Daily Yoga Podcast.
No. Wisdom of the Sages. Every day. Wasn't that something like some ladies' vitamin or something in the 70s? Every day.
Geritol.
Every day. Srimad Bhagavatam. Every day. Try to make this part of your daily morning breakfast, everybody. hearing truth on a regular basis from the sages of ancient India, not us. We're just repeating what the sages have said. And then we try to apply it. We try to see people for what they are, not just what their shell is, for what they are, and treat them with that appropriate dignity that they deserve. And this will diminish the pain of the material world. Thanks everybody for joining us. Thanks for being with me here on location in Puerto Rico. Forgive me for all those roosters in the background. And we're going to be doing live. I'm going to be doing live from Puerto Rico this week. And I want to thank everybody for joining us. Hey, what else did I want to say?
Anything happening today, Mara?
There's a Bhakti recovery group meeting at, I think it's at 1 o'clock.
1 o'clock. Thanks everybody for joining us. If you like what we're doing, keep this boat floating. Become a supporting member at patreon.com/wisdom of the sages. That's the best way to support us, and we keep this going. We're going to try to do this forever. What do you think about that? We are never going to leave you like everybody else has. We're going to stay with you.
We'll never break your heart.
We'll never break you. Thanks, everybody. I really appreciate this community. It's keeping me on track as well. You feel like sometimes it's keeping you on track. It's keeping me on track. So I'm always grateful for the association. It's by good company that we start to float and levitate in this material world. And that's what I'm working on right now. It's called the levitation practice. That's the real yoga, mystic powers. You know that.
What?